Okay, we are live. We are live on both Facebook and YouTube. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, good day. I know that there are many people who are joining us from all over the world. For you, it could be an evening at this point. For some, it could be morning. And here it's afternoon, 2 o'clock. And I'd like to welcome everyone who has watched. There's been a huge amount of interest in this program today, Wenaketi, and I'm so thrilled that you are able to join us and that you are fine. And so I just want to make sure that before we really get on and start, that everyone has been at least given an opportunity to join. And I want to just check if on Facebook it is live. Last week, we had a bit of a challenge where people called in and sent me messages to say we can't access the the thing on Facebook, and I see now it's live. And
Okay.
yeah, you can also just ask maybe your husband to just check if it's live on Facebook, and so that we can get, because from mine it shows that it's on, but if you can, it's on my Facebook page, Patrick Gulati, and then
Okay.
if it's live there, that's great. I just want to
Okay.
welcome all of you. I just want to welcome
Right.
all of you who have joined us from all over the country, and I see that people are joining us on both Facebook and on YouTube. And I just want to welcome you. Please go and call your friends, family, watch, come and comment and make your views known here. At some point, if there are comments, I will then read them out. You can greet our guest. You can just pop in a message to say hello to our guest here, and I'm sure some of you know her. And I'm talking about Kheti Molatlegi. Kheti, in fact, I'm so thrilled to have you here today. If there's one thing I enjoy is to talk to people who can provide tremendous amount of value to our viewers. So, Kheti, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here. I'm not sure if I should be excited or nervous about the people who are watching this afternoon, but I look forward to the discussions. Thank you so much.
Yo, thank you. I look forward to having the conversation as well. Your profile speaks volume about you, and I'm sure it's not just a couple of words on paper. You've done this work, and basically all of us will learn a number of things today from this field of project engineering, things like infrastructure development, and so many issues that surround this. What opportunities are there in this field? How did you get into this thing? And what are the lessons for people, especially young people that are out there watching us and trying to make decisions about their lives in the future? There's nothing that excites me more than to empower people, to inform people, to inspire people. And today, what better way for us to do that here on Moment of Insight and Growth than to host Kheti Molatlegi, who is joining us. I'm glad that you have at least improved enough from your bit of a fluishness in
Yeah.
that cold Cape Town to be able to join us. How is the weather now?
It's a bit cold. It's raining, and my entire family has been sick for the week. So today,
Yeah.
actually, this is the first time I'm starting to feel better. So I thank God for
Okay.
that. I could barely speak yesterday. I had a massive headache, and today, for some
Oh,
reason, I better in the morning. Yeah.
wow, wow, wow. Well, we prayed, we prayed that you get well today. And right where I am, it's very, very warm. Actually, it's hot. The sun is
I
out,
can see.
and that's the beauty of our country. You can have different weathers,
Yeah,
all of
totally.
it. Yes. Okay.
But Patrick,
Uh,
before we proceed, I think
hmm.
we start the challenge on Facebook. I don't think it's live on Facebook.
Is it not live on Facebook?
So YouTube
Okay.
is fine. but Facebook is still a bit of a challenge from what I hear.
Okay. I wonder what could be happening.
Okay.
Okay, I wonder what could be happening. Let's see here. Continue to Facebook. I sent through a message now to see if it's going to be, it shows as if it's live to me here. And I've just sent a message through now. Maybe it's doing what it did to us last week. Let me just all right. I will let me try and do something and see if we cannot just make it okay. I'll just make it public.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna make it public and see how it now goes.
Okay. Oh, okay. Apparently it's on. It's good. We're good to go now.
We're good to go. Okay. So I've seen where the problem was. I've seen the problem was. For those people who have just now joined us on Facebook, we had a similar problem we had last week, but now it seems like it's resolved. And I'd like to welcome all of you to this moment of insight and growth. I have a great, guest today. I think her resume speaks for itself. We're going to learn a bit more about that today. And I'm talking about Kgethi Molatlegi, and she's joining us, and she's coming in all the way from the cold Cape Town. And I'm sure this session is going to warm her heart as it's going to warm all our hearts. I just want to make sure that I have all my ducks in the row here, because sometimes when these technological issues come on and mess us up, it just rattle you, especially if you are like me and you're not a techno person. So.
Okay.
All right. So is it fine now?
Yes. Yeah. I hear that you're all good. Yeah.
You're all good. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I'd like to introduce our speaker today. I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Her name is Kgethi. As I said earlier on, she's working as as an executive in infrastructure and environment, experienced in this field, and she's also trained in project management. She's got a master's in construction engineering, management or management engineering, one of the two. Sorry to mess you up there. And she has worked in so many places as she grew up in this industry. And so it is my pleasure to have Kgethi here with me today. And I'm sure she will tell us a bit more, some of the gaps that I may have missed in this conversation, so that you can understand her background. And, I read when Kgethi in the Engineering News magazine that there's a massive infrastructure backlog, in historic labor-sending regions, especially places like the former homelands and the share of households with pipe water inside the house. So this issue goes to the heart, the issue that we're going to talk about. It goes to the heart of economic growth, the country moving forward in its growth. So please tell us about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up, where you went to school, and then after that, we're going to take it from tertiary level.
Okay, sure. So I was born in Soweto. I was born there. Yeah, I was born in Soweto, and just a year or two later, we then moved to the East Rand with my parents and my sister, and we spent a couple of years there, probably until the age of 9 or 10ish. And then my parents divorced. And when they divorced, it meant that my mom and my sister and I were moving back to my maternal grandparents, and we moved back to Soweto. So then I lived a good part of my upbringing in Soweto. We lived in Soweto up until I concluded my matric. And before the move to Soweto, then I got enrolled into a primary school called Witchwood Primary. And I studied from grade 1 up until grade 5. And when my parents divorced, then I was commuting from Soweto to Germiston, which is quite a distance.
Sure.
To commute
every day.
At that age. Yeah, at that age especially. So then my mom saw that it was not feasible anymore. It was not safe either, because I was traveling by train at the time. And so then my mom decided to move me to a school that was much closer to Soweto. It was called G.R. Harris Primary, and I did then grade 6 and 7 there. And when I concluded that, then I moved to Rand Girls High School, which is in Braamfontein. It's a girls' school. And then I studied literally from grade 8 right up until matric. So I spent a bulk then of my young adult life in Braamfontein. And I lived over, then when I speak about my tertiary education, you'll see that I've spent quite a bit of time in Braamfontein.
Okay.
But yeah, that's my childhood study history. I put it that way. Yeah.
Okay. So you were born and bred and grew up in Soweto and so on. So tell us about your tertiary education, which is quite illustrious, by the way.
So when I was finishing my grade 12, I believed my entire life that I'd be a doctor. And I don't know if it was just coming from interest or passion. I think I was probably just carried away with the term doctor. And I just always visioned that I'd be that person. And when I was in grade 12, then my friends and I went to different academic institutions and we got application forms to apply. And when I got the doctor application form at Wits University, I saw at the bottom it had a section where you had to fill in a number of hours that you would have done community service. So then my friends and I decided we're going to an old age home, and that's where we're going to explore our community service. We went there. It was in Soweto, I remember. And we spent the entire day there. And at the end of the day, I remember going home, I was so discouraged. I said to my mom, I was struggling with this. It didn't smell good at all. And it was just hard labor. It felt like hard labor. And I said to my mom, if I can't handle the stench, it's an old age home, I don't know what I'm going to do in an ER. With its blood gushing, and that one's sick and has sores and all of that. So I came home and I was heartbroken because I thought I can't be a doctor anymore. And my mom, being the person that she is, she encouraged me, I don't know to what, but she kept on saying that I'll figure it out. I'll figure out my passion eventually. So in that quest, then I started asking a couple of people who are in different industries, what do they do? What do their industries entail? And then I met someone who was a civil engineer at the time, and he afforded myself and my friend the opportunity to job shadow for a day. And we did that. And then I learned a bit about civil engineering. I think he was in the transportation sector or something at the time. So I realized he spent a great deal of time outside, and I love outdoors. I thought, perhaps this is perfect, for the personality that I am. But I went home and I still wasn't convinced that civil engineering is it. But then, what option did I have? Also, I always view this period of my life as, now that I'm older, it's a period of hope, and I term it hope for a particular reason, because I didn't have the funds to go to university. There was no way that my mom could afford that, and I didn't have a clear path on how I was going to achieve either being a doctor or anything else. So in any case, I took those forms and we applied to 3 institutions, and my mom gave me the application fee for that, and I put it through. And then fortunately I did well in grade 12, and I got accepted into Wits University. And the different institutions, and I mean, the things I'd applied for were so varied. Thinking about it now, I had no direction, to be honest.
You were sort of trying your luck.
I was all over the show. I applied for something in the finances. I applied for chemical engineering, meteorological engineering, civil engineering. So I was all over the show. And when my application got accepted at Wits. Came through with a bit of a scholarship because of my results in grade 12.
Okay.
So it was a no-brainer. Wits was the answer because at least I could afford a bit of registration fee because of that scholarship. So then I took Wits, and then after 3, it was metallurgical, chemical, and civil. I opted for civil because at least I had a bit of insights from civil engineering. So I opted for civil engineering, and that was the beginning then of my tertiary life. I still had no fun. I just had that scholarship, and I put in a couple of application forms while at high school in grade 12 to various institutions. One was the City of Johannesburg, the other was CSIR, and I can't remember the rest. And I remember CSIR had provisionally accepted me in December when I just received my results. So I was looking forward to that so much. And in January, just before the academic year started, they sent me a rejection letter, and I thought, oh my God, here we are again. I don't have a plan. In any case, the academic year started. I still had no plan, just a registration fee. I went in. I started the academic year. I had no books. I had no tools. I remember we had drawing in first year, and I did not have a drawing board, did not have any of the equipment that I needed. But I started anyway. I thought I'll figure it out. And somewhere along the lines, that first year I'd applied for the scholarship I'd applied for with the City of Johannesburg, they responded with a 15,000 Rand scholarship. It was about March in the year, so it was just at the perfect time because it was just before we started writing tests and things like that. So then they paid out and managed to buy a couple of books and equipment I needed for drawing, and I paid a bit into my fees. But still, that's just 15,000 Rand. I think tuition then was just over 35,000 Rand or so a year. So I put in something into the pocket, but there was still a big gap to fill. And by God's grace, then I made some.
Sorry, there are phrases that, or just phrases that come to my mind as I'm listening to you, and the one that really stands out for me, which I think it's something to even for young people and other people to think about, and maybe when we have time we can unpack it a bit more. As you're sharing your story, you use the phrase "I started anyway," and because it sounds like from what you're saying that because you didn't have the funds, you didn't have the knowledge and all of that kind of stuff enough to be able, but you started anyway, and then a few months later or down the line, then the City of Joburg came up with a scholarship. But the bottom line is that you started anyway. And I thought that was quite a beautiful phrase to put, because some of us give up so quickly, or we don't want to start because not everything is in place as we would like it to have. Sorry to disturb you there, but maybe I do want just to hear your thoughts about that, because, and I'm sure for many Black or let's say young people or people from previously disadvantaged backgrounds have come to this point where a lot of things did not line up for them. There was no scholarship. There was no money saved by the parents in the bank. You didn't know what you're going to do, but you started anyway with the opportunity arose.
Yeah. I don't know. I said to you earlier, I term it hope, but looking at it as now, as an adult now, it was faith. It was really faith in things that I wasn't even certain of. I just had to try. I can. The gentleman that we had job shadowed just the year before, he had made mention that there are a lot of opportunities in engineering, and there are a lot of companies that are willing to fund students in engineering. So don't hope if you don't have anything from the onset. But I mean, I was in first year already, and I thought, the don't lose hope means maybe December to January phase, and somewhere, when Feb hits, someone will say something. But there was still nothing. And I just thought, I have friends who have textbooks, and I can ask the friends for their textbooks when they are not studying that particular subject, and I'll try, to pace myself according to what they're doing. But I was going to make it work. I was so determined that I'm going to varsity. I don't know how, but it's going to happen. That's really what I had. I did not have any bigger thoughts than that. But to me, it really is. It's like trusting in God. and having God show you, because that's my interpretation now as an adult. But at the time, I was really just trying my luck. Then I started, like I said to you, I started anyway, and I then met someone who told me that there's a bursary from a company called Grinica LTA, and I did not even know what Grinica does at the time. I do a quick research, and then I filled in application forms, and I sent them through. And they called me a few weeks later. I remember it was around the end of May when they called me for an interview, and I got the bursary. And they carried me through my entire varsity life. So that was my answer. But it took quite a bit to getting solid funding for tertiary education. It is quite a bit of a journey.
What was the name of the degree that you started off with?
I studied BSc in civil engineering.
BSc in civil engineering, yes. Now tell us a bit more about that. What is civil engineering? What do you study when you study BSc in civil engineering? And it sounds like it's a lot of technical things. So, and what do you need to have in order to be able to register for such?
Yeah, I always say getting into VITS and getting out of VITS is probably the hardest thing you experience, because getting in is got a very high requirement. I think at the time back then there were 2,000 applications, and the intake was so. I mean that's just over just a little 10%. Meaning that you're meeting, at the time I was competing against 2,000 students to get to get space in civil engineering. So basic requirements from high school: you need to do your STEM subjects, your mathematics, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Those big subjects are what will lead you to be able to get enrolled into an engineering discipline, or maybe specifically civil engineering. And then what you do for the rest of your academic life, is elaborate on those subjects. So in the first year, for example, you'll do more generic subjects. So your mechanics, physics, mathematics, geology, like very generic subjects that give you an overview of quite a lot of things that happen in the industry. And the higher you go, then the more streamlined you are. So it's more hydraulics, structures, geotech, and I know some institutions do transportation, which VITS didn't do at the time. So you get more streamlined the higher you go, and you're more focused on specific subjects. That was basically my undergrad degree.
Okay. And so you do need to have the STEM subjects, science and maths and so on. At least as someone would know that those are the requirements. But there must also be, sort of apart from just academic or study, but there must also be character requirements, the kind of mentality, the kind of person that you are to be able to have the discipline. What are some of those?
Yeah, I think varsity has got an interesting space. It's a fun place to be at. I think it would be very nice for everyone to get an opportunity to be at varsity, because you're almost, you set into a play field, and what you decide to become in that space is really entirely up to you. But I think from a characteristic perspective, to be able to succeed perhaps in engineering, you need a bit more discipline, like you've just mentioned. We engineering students spend quite a lot of time in the library. It's highly demanding. And I think over discipline, you need to be a bit more curious about life, I'd say. Ask the questions why. How do things work? Why do things work this way? Who said so? And why should we do it that way? Things that we were taught not to ask. Because I remember when I was growing up, my grandmother said, stop asking why. Don't ask me about that. But once you start in getting into that field, the more questions you ask, the better it is for you, because then you get to understand things more deeply, get a deeper understanding of things. So I'd say some level of curiosity would do, and perseverance. Like I mentioned, it's quite difficult to get into it and to varsity for this, and it's also very difficult to get out, because the course is quite difficult. It's quite it's a hard course.
It's demanding on you, ne?
it's demanding, and the time frames in which you need to perform are quite short. So it becomes really, you put yourself under a lot of pressure. So a lot of people don't finish in record time. A lot of people either sometimes drop out because it's quite difficult. That's why I'm saying it's difficult to get out of the institution with the degree in your hands as well. So while you're at university, you need to have a lot of perseverance. Even if you fail this test, just think that I'm going to work hard. I'm going to try and do better next time. And you just you have to keep pushing yourself up until you get to a point where you get the qualification. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's no leisure. I won't lie. It definitely is no leisure. It's difficult.
Wow. Yeah. Hard work. Disciplined, just dedication. I just want to acknowledge some of the people that have joined. I see here that Totyelwa Libumbe Pikoli, hello, Sisi, good to see you. Babalam Kolombane, good to see you. I know that there may be others, but they do not show up on my thing here. That's on Facebook. I see that there are many others, but I can't seem to see that. But I'll be able to pick it up as time goes on. We are talking to Kgethi Molatlegi, who is a project engineer, or basically civil engineering and construction management and so on. And you were talking earlier on about going to getting your what you call your study support or the scholarship from Greenacre. We're going to come back to your work there as well. But as I was preparing for this, especially now that you are talking about some of the demand that the course has on you, I read that engineers of various stripes crowd the upper rungs of the scarce skills list. This is not surprising given the volume of infrastructure and construction projects underway. It is also worth noting that most South African construction engineering firms have diversified abroad and so on. So the point I think that it is making, that this skill is a scarce skill in South Africa. And I know later we're going to be talking about the transformation aspects, gender, race, and so on. But at the university, how was it looking like when it comes to race and gender? Were there women? Yeah.
Demographics are definitely what the country is looking at is literally what university is producing.
Okay.
I'd say of the 250, I mean, maybe just to give you a realistic picture, of the 250 that we started with in first year, by second year, that quickly became 100 students. In third year, that quickly became 80 or 70 students, and it kept on diminishing as we were going higher and higher. So it filters quite a bit, and you can see the substantial filter. But when you compare white versus black students, there are definitely more white students. Probably, I'd say non-white students probably made up about 20 to 30%, and females is a much smaller fraction of that. So back then, that was the case. I'm not quite sure how things are doing now, but I mean, I checked a bit of stats before we started. It really, what the country is looking at is a reproduction of what is experienced at university. Still very much dominated by white fellows, and even from a lecturing level, you find that those people that lecture are white people, and you find that of the black people that lecture, they often from foreign African countries. So it's not even South African bred. In my entire varsity experience, I only had one black South African lecturer, and she was female. And the rest came from abroad. So it gives you a glimpse of what is the reality of South Africa.
Yeah. And parents and leaders of society, you can clearly see that, because if you look at the top 10 scarce skills in South Africa, this area of engineering forms part of that. And on the other hand, we're talking about a huge backlog of major infrastructure projects that have got to be implemented. From bridges to train stations to housing, to everything that is needed to be done. Clearly, as a country, we need more investment in this. Now, coming to your current work now, you are currently working as a project engineer and at Saldanha Bay Industrial Development Zone. Before you explain what this entails, just give us a synopsis of your work history, and also just a bit about this Saldanha Bay Industrial. I know that you're not officially speaking for them, but what is this place doing? What is this there for?
Okay, so I'll start on my work history, and then I'll move over to Special Economic Zone. Work history, you recall that I was funded by Grinaca LTA, which is a construction company,
yes,
while I was doing my undergrad studies. And fortunately, then while I was studying, they would offer me vocational work. So every time we had holidays, I could go in and work for the company, earn a stipend of some sort and just gain the skill or get acquainted to what I was actually going to do a bit later on in life. So that's what I did up until I completed my undergrad. And then when I started working, they took me into the employ, and I became a junior site engineer at the time. And I must say, I got exposed to some of the most exciting projects in my life. As a student, I remember it was the 2010 season, the World Cup season. And one of the projects I started on was Soccer City. And I mean, that was a big project, but then, Soccer City
in Joburg.
In Nasrec. Yes, in Nasrec, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. When we drive there, I literally can see things that I've built or have put up as a student, and that was quite exciting. It was a big achievement.
I'm sure it was.
Then. It was very much. I mean, fast forward, I did a couple of other projects as a student as well, but fast forward to then my working career, I got put onto a project called The Mark, or it was called Village Walk at the time, but it's a building in Sandton called The Mark. It was like a pineapple gold-shaped building. And I was thrown into that deep end at the very beginning of my career, and I thought, oh my word, what is this? I don't know what I'm going to do here and how I'm going to survive this. I had a my boss had very high expectations from people, and he just threw me into the very deep. So starting my career, I was working very long hours. I remember our day used to start at 6:30 in the morning. I'd knock off from work at 2 a.m. some days, 3 a.m. some days, go back home, get a quick nap, shower, go back to work. Because, it's construction. Time is money. You need to keep moving, and you need it to build as rapidly as possible. So I was really exerting myself in that job and learned quite a lot. In retrospect, I think that hardship was a lot of character building for me. I didn't have to put in the long hours, but because there was expectation that we'd finish a project in a certain duration, I knew I had to just put in a bit more. So then I worked there. The next year, I got a promotion to site engineer. Then I continued working. And then we moved over to a building across the road. The building was called the Leonardo. It was the tallest in Africa at the time. And now it definitely probably isn't. It's also a commercial building, and it's also in Sandton as well. So quite exciting projects. And then from there, I moved over to the Saldanha Bay IDZ. And I joined the Saldanha Bay IDZ as an infrastructure project engineer. And I worked for 3 years as project engineer, and then I got promoted then into executive in infrastructure environment, which is the same unit, but just an executive role in the same unit. And then I've been operating in that space since. And then just a bit more on the IDZ, and I'd like to just paint a holistic picture before I even dive into what specifically IDZ does. So special economic zones, I read up that the first one started in Ireland around the 1950s, and then the model was copied, and one of the places where the model was very successful was China. And most people know China as the hub of special economic zones. And that was around the 1970s or so. And the way in which China thought about it was, because the economy was really struggling, they're a developing country, but the economy was really struggling at the time, and they had a lot of people who were unemployed, similar to what we had. They wanted to stimulate economic growth within their country. So they thought, if we start this idea of special economic zones and build an environment that is very conducive for investments, and we foster investments, foreign direct investments into this place, then in that way we'll be stimulating economic growth. So what they did, identified certain land, certain portions or parts of China, which would be that exactly that. Then they bring in, for example, they in Chinese format, the Department of Labor, for example, SARS, which would handle your taxation and custom laws, and then put in policies that would make the environment friendly to business, to running business within that framework. So then, in essence, it was setting up an environment that would make the ease of doing business, set up the ease of doing business environment for foreigners to come in and invest. And what was of an advantage then, obviously back then in China, was that they were offering cheap labor. And I don't want to get into that debate whether or not it was right.
Yeah.
You don't want to get into that. And also then they didn't put in a lot of measures to protect the environment as well. So it was really kind of your business will offer you cheap labor. We'll make sure that you've got land. We'll make sure that your customs, you get benefits from running business in here. You'll get corporate tax incentives. Put in all sorts of measures to make sure. And then from an infrastructure perspective, you get the land, you get it serviced, meaning it's got bulk infrastructure, water, electricity. You've got a factory to operate from, and then put in those measures in place. And that's what the model looked like. And it became very successful. It became very successful in places like Shenzhen, and then it got replicated in different areas. And now in South Africa copied a similar model, and we've got special economic zones operating in different areas. One in Saldanha Bay, another in Kucha, another in KZN. And they're quite a lot. Another in the Northern Cape. So they're quite a lot in our country, and the model is pretty much the same. So to build an environment that is conducive to investment. So if our ease of doing business unit goes out and finds an investor and brings them to the Saldanha Bay IDZ, which is a physical footprint, then that footprint has got the infrastructure that's required to make sure that that building stands, and it's got all the infrastructure requirements to make sure that it functions. And that's my role at the IDZ. That's what I do. I put in the infrastructure in place. That's from a project engineering perspective. And then looking at an executive role perspective is more of a strategic kind of role where one needs to look at future-proofing the IDZ. So what do I do from a sustainability perspective, an energy efficiency perspective, an environmental consciousness perspective? What do I do from an infrastructure perspective to make sure that all these can future-proof the IDZ so that it stands long and caters for what future development could look like. So that's the role that I have at the IDZ.
Okay. Wow. Actually, Usetos Unyansile, when he says, this is very impressive. Thank you so much, Setos Nyagacha, a veteran, a radio veteran, a man that I respect so highly. He has just made a comment to say, this is very impressive. And what you're talking about is very, very powerful as well, because we now understand that this work that you are doing has broader investment implications to make sure that our country's economy and job creation and environment is looked after and all of those kinds of things. It reminded me of my work in the earlier history where I was the project specialist on things like sustainable development. Those years, the three bottom lines, economy, environment, and society. And to see that these matters are now the issues really is amazing. I just want to acknowledge, I see that Stoneberry has joined us. Welcome. Lungile Mbunge, Oscar Dube, Sbusiso, hey guys, good to see you. Utokiela, I've already mentioned her, and then Usetos Nyagacha. And those are the people that I can pick up so for now. But indeed, I would just welcome those that have just joined us. Go or call your friends, call others. We're learning right here because these matters are very, very important to understand as a country. Now, what are the opportunities? You've been in this field now for all these years. You were part of major iconic projects. I mean, 2010, we were all excited. And those of us who were not involved in the engineering side, we didn't know what was happening behind this. And we were just excited about the fact that we were hosting matches in the World Cup and so on. All right. So what? So I just want to find out a bit more about this. What are the opportunities for people who are thinking and contemplating of going into this area?
Okay. I want to maybe put this disclaimer that project engineering is a title that my company uses for certain functions.
Okay.
So I'm not.
Yeah. Okay. It could be civil engineering or something. Yeah.
Yes, it could be civil engineering. So that's what I want to come to. That normally, when one branches off from civil engineering, there are normally three spheres or three directions that they could take. It's either the construction, which is where I started, and you grow within the construction sector. And you become a contracts manager, eventually a contracts director. That's the route. And your prime responsibility will be putting up infrastructure. You're the executor in all of it. And then the other function is the designer. There's a design function, which most of my colleagues and my peers have gone into. And that really is just taking the client's interpretation of the client's brief and interpreting it into a design, basically designing the walls, the columns, the foundations, everything that needs to go into the structure. And then the last part of it is project management, which is basically running and monitoring and running the administrative function of projects, which it basically includes the other two spheres. So what I do as a project engineer touches on all three of these, and that's how I'm involved. Remember, I mean, I spoke to planning, scheduling, monitoring, making sure that you coordinate the technical expertise to make sure that the building is put into place. So those are all functions that I'm responsible of as a project engineer. And that's why I say it might differ from organization to organization, but generally then other opportunities, one could be a structural engineer. If you want to go the design route, you could be a structural engineer, you could be a civil engineer, you could be a geotechnical engineer, you could be in water and sanitation, you could be in transportation. So it's quite a big sector that one can partake in. You could be a project engineer on the other side, and then the other side you could be a construction person. But also I don't want to limit it to that, because I always see that undergrad certificate or that undergrad qualification is a launch pad. That's what I see it as. It's always a place from which you start from, but you can rocket to any direction that you want. And what's beautiful about this career is that you can paint it to what you can. It's a canvas, and you can make it whatever you want. People are working on sustainability today, which was never looked at as a particular sector, but there is sustainability, and companies know that they need to be sustainable in the next coming years. So an engineer is quite critical for that, and to make sure that they adhere to the three, the bottom line three. Which is social, economic, and environmental sustainability. People specialize in that sector. There are people who are part of the regulations type of field or policy making. That's part of it. And I know engineers who work in the banking sector. So I mean, really,
the scope is wide.
It's so wide. Studying STEM subjects really helps you to cast the net as wide as possible, because you can always go back to your financial, economic streams. But if you go the STEM route, then that's open, but you also have the engineering side of it open to yourself as well. So it's quite it's a big part, and you decide to take it.
Okay, and now you're involved. You're saying at an executive level, which is more strategic management, leadership. I take it that you now have to look after budgets and people and things like that. And how does that look like?
Fortunately, we're a small organization, so it's not looking after too many people. It's managing investor expectations. That's the challenge. Some people want very big things from very small budgets. So, internally, it is managing here and there a few people, but it's not too much of my job. But really translating what an investor wants to what is possible is really the biggest challenge of our jobs. And also making sure that it remains within the mandate of the IDZ, which is maritime, energy and logistics sector. We want to make sure that each investor that comes through sticks within that mandate to make sure that we're able to deliver on what's possible. So, and also then I'd say from a much bigger than IDZ perspective, it's competing imperatives. Like, there's so many, especially on the West Coast, there are a lot of environmental constraints. So a lot of the land is identified as critical biodiversity, meaning that it's got plants that are quite scarce in our country and are endangered. And at the same time, it's an area that is very close to the port, which is ideal for development and running a special economic zone. So what do you do between the environmental policy perspective versus the economic demand that is required? Because Saldanha is it's not very grown economically. Very few of the people are employed. It's still very much a developing area. So they're very competing imperatives in the area. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I see that Ace Jumbo, Andy Lenzokolo. Hey, Ace man, thanks, Pat. Thanks, man. I am the one who's supposed to be thanking you for joining us. One Sintlanegas. Mamtlane, good to see you. One Sintlanegas, the Nkonki, good to see you, Sisi. Mfundis wam, usivu Kotela. Umzangwa, good to see you. And Maleshwane Tabang, good to see you, sis. I hope you are all fine. Those that I can pick up from this. But people are really learning from this conversation. Now, we've had some great projects in South Africa in the past. You talk about 2010, the stadiums and the Gautrains, Kucha, and many others that has come up. But still there is a huge need for infrastructure investment and growth in South Africa. What is your take about how we as a country are doing in this regard in terms of infrastructure development for economic growth?
Before I answer that question, what is interesting when I was in China, going back to that SEZ story I told you earlier, we went to China to actually see what these people were talking about because we've read about it and what's actually going on in China. So I went to China in my very first year of working at the IDZ. And what I realized, if you ask any lay person or any layman about special economic zone in which they either live in or live around, they're able to tell you that this is the economic stimulus of our country. So this is what we use to generate income for our country. They knew that. And when I came back to South Africa, I realized that it's the complete opposite. People don't even know about special economic zones.
Exactly.
It's operating on an island, literally. And this is meant to be the we're at a port, which is the central location for business. We should be open to facilitating a lot of business that's happening there. But here we are in a context where people don't even know about these. Going back then to the broader question that you asked about South Africa as a whole, I think there's quite we're far behind. I think possibly the pre-apartheid or apartheid era, I think that's where most of our infrastructure development took place. And post that, very little development, and even more so, very little maintenance of the infrastructure that was put in place in the apartheid era. We're letting ourselves down, I think, very much. If you look, Joburg is a very nice case study of potholes and the lack of maintenance of roads. You look at, our SOEs that's supposed to be providing power. Most of the load shedding that we get is because of lack of maintenance. So let alone on providing new infrastructure, maintaining the existing infrastructure is sitting at a backlog. And you've correctly stated that the engineering skills, or the civil engineering and other engineering disciplines are quite are mentioned quite high up there when it comes to the skills scarcity of skills in South Africa. What's interesting is that most people that I know are leaving the country and going to different countries because there isn't a clear direction of where we're going as a country in developing infrastructure. So people then are finding it's difficult to get jobs in South Africa and to get jobs. Most people that work for the government, for example, they feel that their skills are not being utilized to the maximum, and therefore they choose to leave those government sectors and go work elsewhere where they feel like mostly private sector really uses your skills to the max. So how do you balance the two? People are leaving because they feel like they're not being utilized to the max, or to full capacity, and yet we have a backlog of infrastructure that's required. Children are still, we hear every single year of children that are still dying in pit toilets. We hear every single year of people that are dying, trying to cross the river in a flood, and they die along that river. That's because of a lack of infrastructure. So there's a clear need for infrastructure, but I think from an implementation perspective, the funding and the clear directive to develop infrastructure is not coming forth, and that's the biggest challenge that we have in the country.
And you're right, Maleshwane, it's so sad. It's so sad that we have a huge need, a huge backlog, because under apartheid, the infrastructure was not designed to accommodate everyone. And now we are much more in numbers, and we all have to depend on the infrastructure. And it's not being, even the one that is started, it has project overruns, budget overruns, delays, and years. We've seen about the Madupes and all these big power stations that have been sort of overrun and so on. And corruption is a big issue. We're not going to talk about that today. But I think the point that you are making is that there are huge opportunities in South Africa if we were to have a clear plan, and if we were to have a move towards this, so that we can draw those people back. Very interesting, Siyabonga. Indeed, Katyeni, this is very, very interesting. Now, earlier on, I started, asking you about the IGZ. In fact, if you were to look, I read up a lot on China and places like Kenya, places like Rwanda, places like Ethiopia, and sometimes visited some of those places where you can see that the countries are really moving forward. But what is clear, for example, there's the latest China 5-year plan. It has very clear timelines, clear projects, and they can actually take you through where they are now. And there's a central focus on that. So we can have all the plans, but there does not seem to be strong drive for implementation. Any general comments on that?
Well, I totally agree. And I think our biggest challenge is that everything is dictated by politics. That's the reality of our country. And so if people are looking at a tenure in which they serve, and once that tenure is done, then it's the next shift. But no one can plan in a specific tenure and not have a continuity plan of how that thing is going to move along and I move out of office for the next person to come along. So that's why we have these dying. There are a lot of white elephants in our country, projects that just started and the building is up, but it's not running. There's no one really to run the operations that are intended for that building. So it really, unfortunately, it's one of those where, as a citizen, you need to make a contribution. But, up there, high up as the leadership of the country, we need that clear direction, as you've clearly indicated about China. I mean, watching the Chinese is just something like watching a machine work, because they are very precise and very clear of their intentions and how they plan to do things. So if we could have that clear policy and clear direction from high up in the realms of the government, then it would help a lot in ensuring that project execution also reaches the lower level.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. Nakutotyelwa uthi, do you think there are plans in the future where there would be centers or institutions which can promote more exposure to learners, to the engineering investors to develop in this space, so that they can retain the skills here in our country than to go and develop in other countries? What do you think about the pipeline?
Personally, I haven't heard of such plans from any institutions, apart from when I was still in high school. There used to be I forgot what that place was, but it was in Newtown. It was a science center of some sort, and students from anywhere could go there and learn about things such as astrophysics, things that I've never heard of before. But then you'd be at least open up to what STEM subjects could lead up to. I hear I've seen quite a number of my peers doing sessions such as this, talking about, and I see people in their personal capacity more than organization level, trying to talk about STEM careers and engineering opportunities are out there. So I see more of people taking the initiative to educate out there more than really from an organizational perspective. I'm not fully aware of them, and maybe I've missed the buzz, but I haven't seen quite a lot of
Yeah. It's quite interesting because as I was talking to you about China, Rwanda, Kenya, I just noticed that a friend of mine, a former colleague from Rwanda, Kwizera Bosco. Hey, Bosco, good to see you, man. And I intend, we've spoken about this with Bosco. He's a former colleague from Rwanda, where I'm going to bring him on board to talk about how Rwanda is doing it. They've got a plan which is powerful, which I really like. When I was there, he took me to see some of the stuff that were happening. And Bosco, I'm so happy that you managed to join us. And I'm going to contact you so that I can bring you on board here so that we can talk about what is it that you guys are doing there that we can learn as a country here in South Africa. Because clearly there are things that are working and we all have to learn from one another. I'm glad that you joined us. Now, this field, as we had spoken about earlier on, is, you said you started off with about 250 students, thereabouts, students. But as the years went by, I mean, the first year you started losing. By the time you came to the end, there were about 80 or something like that. And then out of that, there were few females, few black students. And even those then are leaving the country. Now, you are in this field, which is also male-dominated for a long time. What is your assessment of transformation, particularly in terms of race, gender, youth participation, and how procurement is being used to develop communities and people from previously disadvantaged communities?
Sure. I did a quick search to see what transformation looks like, and unfortunately I found something a bit dated, but I think it's not relevant. It's information from 2013 from it's called World Bank's Equality Equation Report, and also something from EXA, which I'll explain a bit more. It said 13% of graduates are from STEM disciplines, so only 13%, and then 7%. 1-3, and then 7% of these graduates are women engineers, so only that fraction. And then from an EXA report in 2013, it said only 15.5% of Black students obtain their engineering degrees. This is 2013. And then the next one was that women make up 3% of that 15.5%. This is 10 years ago. I am of the opinion that this hasn't changed much. If it has grown, it's probably doubled. But I mean, doubling 3% is 6%, and doubling 15.5 is 31%, which isn't much of a change. It's still quite a big gap. So I think from an institutional level, there's still quite a slow uptake of particularly Black people and particularly female. And I don't know what the base reason is for that. Perhaps it's a lack of knowledge about engineering disciplines. I know there was a myth when we grew up that maths is one of the most difficult subjects, and as you're going into high school, you know that if you take maths, oh my word, your life is miserable. It's going to be a misery. But only to realize that actually it's probably one of the most fun subjects if you really enjoy it and you really take it for what it's meant to be. So maybe those misconceptions around that age where people are starting to choose their subjects from a high school level still live to date. I'm not quite sure, but clearly people who go into varsity are not particularly looking at STEM subjects. So that needs to change. That's really the first place where we need to change. And then the second place is once we graduate, as we go into into the workforce, my belief is that a lot of institutions and companies, maybe let me be clear, companies are funding, and especially in my era, we're funding engineering students. So you'd get a bit, at least some Black students coming into this because suddenly there was funding available, which has always been a challenge for Black students. So funding is coming in, we're getting taken into institutions, but the growth path while you're in that organization is not clear, and that becomes a challenge. It's not good to be in an organization and remain at junior level only. One needs to grow. And I think that is where the ceiling really is. Black people are not taken up into senior management And I'm not quite clear on what the reason is, but I think there's a clear ceiling for Black people, and it's oppressive in nature. I don't think it's forward thinking. There are a lot of very capable people that I know that would definitely do well in senior positions. So this needs to be to be thought through clearly. And then coming in from a policy perspective from local businesses and smaller contracting companies, the country has tried to put in things called preferential procurement policies and things like triple P, it's the buzzwords, about
Yeah.
I'm not so sure if the implementation is what was perceived upon writing that policy, because it's so open-ended and open to interpretation as well. I think the aim was to ensure that there's a certain quota of Black people or of women or of disabled people, of youth involved in projects. So, one of the most famous one is that if a project value is over 30 million rand, 30% of that project value needs to be earmarked for local development or local subcontracting, which means that if you are running a project of 30 million rand, then 30% of that 30 million rand needs to employ your local subcontractors. You need to bring in your local skills and everyone that's local so that they can have a stake in the project. The interpretation of it somewhat is that, and some people, I don't know if you've heard of the construction mafia, gangs come into a construction site with guns and they say, I want to take 30% of this project because preferential procurement policies say so. So it's lost in interpretation. Bringing policy is great, but also see it through, which is quite the challenge.
I know.
And
I know exactly. Sorry to disturb you. I was just thinking that when you were talking about that, at some point when I was at Habitat, I was running a project, a housing delivery project, which was something like 380 million rand in KwaZulu-Natal.
Sure.
And I tell you, you had people coming on site, forcing the construction workers to put down, sending away the project managers. And, you had to talk to the chiefs and everybody. It was quite a bad. So the project would delay for weeks, And so I know I've unfortunately experienced that myself. And then I see that we have Mobile Mabobole. Good to see you, Sisi. Andy good to see Komle. Sorry to butcher your surname there. Good to see you. I'm so happy that you guys have managed to join us. Apparently. And then in Mafia Construction, he was going to ask about that. And it is just, it's not just in the construction sector, but it also all infrastructure projects that are out there. This thing is now being metastasizing and institutionalized. Yes, I cut you short there, sorry.
And even beyond infrastructure projects, I mean, people that work in fast-moving goods, for example, my husband works there, and in certain areas for big companies to be able to deliver their products so that those products can be sold in those areas, they need to pay a protection fee to operate in those areas. So people believe that if this company is coming to Non, Clover, whatever, is bringing a product here, then they're going to have to pay the gangsters in that area a certain fee so that they can operate in that area. I mean, that's daylight robbery. And in this country and in this economy that we're living in, it's unfair to businesses, I think. And again, I leave it at getting lost in interpretation. That 30% localization meant that the local people that you bring into a project need to add value to the project, and you also need to add value to them by giving them a certain portion of the project. So it's a complex one. Yeah,
it's a complex one. Yeah. All right. So what should, especially in line with what Thotyela was asking now, what should then government, the industry itself, what should we do to turn around the situation in our country? Because clearly, if I hear you correctly, there are huge opportunities, and you are the epitome. You are the example of what our country can produce. and fortunately you are still here. You are still investing yourself here, and we want more of young people like that. Now, if you had an opportunity to talk to the powers that be, what for you would need to be in place to ensure that the kind of infrastructure projects and attracting people into this field is fast-tracked and is delivered and yields the kind of results that we all want? What would you say is needed?
Sure. Stealing from or watching other countries, that specifically China, that we've spoken about quite a lot, they've got people skilled in the right departments. So, for example, if I am a water and sanitation minister, then I have a qualification that backs that up. And if I'm the finance minister or minister of economics, then I have the qualification that backs that up, because it helps them with framing how you think about that particular discipline. For example, firstly, policy is our problem. I think some of our policies are great, but how we see that through is perhaps short-sighted and not quite clear. So I think we need a clear direction of how certain policies need to be implemented. That's the first thing. We need to have a longer-term vision. So instead of seeing their office term as, the be it and end all, one needs to plan from that and have a long-term or continue to plan, which I spoke to earlier on how things can be implemented. So that's from higher up. And then moving further down below into organizations, we need to start thinking beyond the limits of the organization and the greater good of South Africa. For example, at the IDZ, and I don't want to speak much about what we do as an organization, but I think this is quite pivotal for the conversation that we're having now. Speaking to the construction mafia and all of that, we receive certain funds to implement certain projects, and implementing those projects means we need to bring in the locals. And we've realized very quickly that when we start bringing local enterprises into these projects, a way of thinking the IDZ that is delivered to the small businesses that are coming in, that this is what we intend on doing and this is how you're going to do it as well, so that we all work collectively to achieve this goal. Otherwise, it quickly becomes a mafia situation. So we've got a clear framework of how we intend on bringing up infrastructure, a clear framework of how we intend on subcontracting, a clear framework of what kind of jobs we intend on subcontracting locally. So it's all about being clear in the messaging and your beliefs as an organization. And once you've got that out, then it becomes easier for anybody that's coming in to not hold you hostage and try and demand things from you, because you've set it out quite clearly on what you want. So I think it really starts from up at the top, the lack of clarity, and it always filters down. So everyone needs to bring their level or their house in order for it to filter down. And so that's how we've done it at the IDZ. And fortunately, we've never had an issue where we have construction mafia stopping a project. Instead, we've watched projects or enterprises develop from a CIDB grading, which is something that is used as a measurement of the level or the amount of projects that an enterprise can undertake. So when you're a CIDB level 1, then there's a certain budget cap that you can undertake, and so forth. It continues growing. And the greatest are in the region of 9 and 8 and so forth. We've watched companies grow from CIDB grading 1 to grading 6, for example, through the projects that we've had at the IDZ. So that is growth. That's what growth should look like.
So you're helping them along the way.
Helping them along the way, and we've watched the skill develop over the past couple of projects that we've had. So that for me, that's what growth looks like. And if we could all implement that growth model at a large scale, then we'd achieve the objectives that we have as a country.
Yeah, if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is basically the current model is that of people wanting a quick buck, huge amounts of money from a short space of time. But you are promoting a sort of what you call a growth model, which is where a person goes through. I mean, if you're talking about a company that you met with at the level of CIDB1, and then now so that's a growth. That means that person or that company has picked up these qualifications. So it's a wonderful way to put it. And I just want to appreciate that we got to learn a bit more about you. I see that we also have now not only Lungile Mbunge, but we also have Bongi Wembunge. Mangasana, good to see you. It's always good to have people joining this, because we are all about learning. People may come from different backgrounds and different things, but ultimately, all of us are learning to really to see how the world is working, and to also encourage those that are up and coming to say that there is still hope in the world. There are people who grew up in the very same conditions as you did, but the people, you use the word, the phrase like "I started anyway." I liked that so much, and then you said you committed yourself to say, "I was going to make it work." So, in other words, when you started off your career, if those of you have just joined us now, you may have missed the part where Khetty was telling us about how her career started, where she didn't really know exactly what she was going to do. She wanted to do, she wanted to become a doctor, and then she realized when she went to visit, man, this is not my game, and then sort of muddled her way through, and then she gave credence and praise to God that she finally got to civil engineering, and then says, "I was going to make it," and you use terms like that. Now, as we are drawing to a close, now I just want to just ask this question to say, how do you manage? Because when you have projects, it could be a construction, whatever the case may be, there is always the delivery, the time dimensions, the budget dimensions, scope, and all of that on the one side. And then in the case of South Africa, there are these other requirements like transformation requirements and all of those kinds of things, which people may look at and say, man, if I'm going to have to comply with all of those things, the project delivery schedule is going to suffer. So how is there a way in which these things can be handled together, or is this a difficulty?
It's a very complex thing. In this climate that we operate in, I always look at the private sector, what they do, because initially I was employed in the private sector, and the private sector was growing back then, especially in the building fraternity.
So is the IDZ a government entity?
State-owned company, yeah. It's a
state-owned. Oh, it's a state-owned company. Okay, entity. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And then where I started from was a construction. In the construction sector was a private company,
sector. Yeah.
Private sector, and I've watched private, and I imagine that you're asking the question in the building context, or the building context. I've watched most of these big five or big companies that were operating in the built environment. I've watched them shrink over the past couple of years. Most of them have become very small scaled, if not closed. And that has meant a lot of people have been retrenched over the past couple of years. And if you are an owner of an organization that is at risk of closing up because you're not getting projects anymore, and that's been the challenge of South Africa, projects are not coming through anymore, and the government has been a source of projects from the get-go. Those projects are no longer coming through. We've got challenges such as load shedding, which mean that your operating hours are being reduced, so there isn't enough revenue that's coming in as you used to get before. So if you are downsizing in scale, and you haven't, it touches back on the answer I gave initially when I said I don't see a lot of black people filtering up to top management. Now, if you're left, you need to downscale your company, and you can only keep certain skills, and the black people haven't made it in those job functions. Then how do you achieve transformation? Because you did not nurture those skills into those jobs. So how do you achieve those objectives? So it's very difficult. And I've realized that very few people are willing to groom certain trades within their businesses. Instead, people would rather hire out instead of grooming, in-house grooming, which is usually the cheaper way of doing things in my own understanding. But people would rather hire out and hire very expensive. So in that, very little is happening and transforming because you're downsizing, and if there aren't any skills and any black particular skills, female skills, then it leaves very little room for you to survive as a business. And then countrywide perspective, I think there's still very much a lot of room then from a government sector to still foster transformation. It should be the core of how government works, and it should be the idea of outsourcing is a good thing, but also some level of grooming internally should be running at the core of who we are as entities. So that's I think that probably would answer the transformation objective.
Yeah, I think it segues quite nicely into the last few questions. I think maybe one or two that I have, because I've read your comment on the importance of mentoring to facilitate, and I think the point that you are making here also speaks to that. Anything else to add?
Sure. Mentoring was quite a big part of my development. And I believe mentorship should be at the core of any form of development. When I was in the construction sector, I was energetic, so I loved doing. I was very eager to do things. But my director at the time, or boss at the time, quickly figured that if I continue in the trajectory, I'm all over the show. I'm not steered into any direction. That might be a problem in the long run. And he realized that he can't be the player and the referee on my court. He can't help me, to keep running, but at the same time be the regulator on the one side. So then he quickly saw the need to organize a mentor, and he arranged someone that he had worked with in the past that had mentored him to come and start mentoring me. And I really gained a lot from that. He was an old man. He still is an old man, in his 70s at the time. And he was in his 70s. And I really love old people for that, because they've got a clearer and higher perspective of life, whereas you just see the little cocoon that you're in at the time. My husband and I love talking about this, and he's quite a profound Chinese proverb with me. It reads as follows. It says, when someone shares something of value with you and you benefit from it, you have the moral obligation to share it with others. And I thought that resonates much with me. It's a moral obligation, so nothing beyond. A lot of people, when they go into retirement, they look forward to just relaxation and just enjoying the fruits of the entire years of labor. But if actually that could be a point of reflection on what have I done, how have I contributed to the greater good of South Africa, how have I improved the young people or the upcoming generation, then it really helps to give a perspective. I think mentorship helps in steering for one. As when you're young, you're quite ambitious and you think you can achieve all and do all, which is quite a good thing. But it helps when someone can rein you into direction, that if you try this, it might help you quicker that way. Or if you do this, then it might be the end of your career. So those, the tools to just help to steer along the way. And I remember my mentor would help me to prepare for interviews. That's something I never had, because he had run the company before. He knew what he was looking for whenever he was interviewing someone. So to have someone of that caliber come and practice that with you one cannot quantify that kind of value. So mentorship is really key in everything. If you've learned, if I've learned, then it's only our duty to impart some of those things to the upcoming generation. I'm a firm believer in it, and because I've seen the value that I've derived from it in my own personal career.
You yourself you're a beneficiary of it, and there's no better way of putting it. There's no way except what Maleshwane is saying. She says, pass it forward. It forward. Apart from VETS, do you know of any other institutions where people can learn, at least here in South Africa, engineering?
Well, so I think most tertiary institutions, I did my postgrad at Stellenbosch, so that's also one of the universities that one can do.
Can you remember your thesis? What was it on?
It was about preferential procurement policies as well. I was touching quite a lot on that. I can't remember the exact topic off by heart, but what I was touching was how do preferential policies versus reality, how does one look at that and ensure that whatever preferential policies have dictated is what is being translated into the industry? So something of that nature. I can't remember what the thesis was saying, but Also, it was
I
quite
got
an
you
exciting.
without that, sorry.
Yeah, very much, very much. But
My
yeah,
bad.
I was touching really on preferential policies. It's been a bugbear for quite a while, and I sought to try and touch on it in the thesis itself.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I see Kansani Molimane has joined us. Are
That's
you
my
related
sister.
to this? Yeah.
That's my sister.
It's your sister. Hello, sister. Good to see you. Wandisile Godro is here. Good to see you, Mshumael. Andile, you're sorry, Anele Jafta. Good to see you, Laki Nkundwan. He's joined us from the start, Laki. I'd like to welcome those of you that I've just mentioned now that have joined us, but we are nearly wrapping up now. But you were saying that the most, tertiary institutions have this, so people can check it out if they wanted to do it.
Wits, UJ, TUT, I think, University of Pretoria. Most institutions have some degree of civil engineering in it or engineering disciplines.
Okay.
So it's something that wouldn't be very difficult to find if one were to do a Google search.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We now have come to the end of our program this afternoon. Such a great and informative guest today. I'm so happy. To the last I saw you and your husband at the book launch. Just gives me a chance to just talk about this book. Anyone who wants this book, our guest, I think, has it. You can also come and get it from me. This book, A Gap in the Cloud. We are just about to close at the present moment. How is the baby?
Baby is sorry. The baby is not there. She's 1 year, 6 months now. She's super active, learning how to speak. Unfortunately, she has flu as well, but she's the most active I've met. And and sometimes let us pull our hairs out of our heads. The things that she does. Sometimes she just, oh my word, how did you learn this one? It doesn't come from. So she's an exciting person to watch, and it's a nice reflection of yourself in some aspects.
Yes.
You do not know how they look because you're seeing someone emulate that. You're like, oh my word, this is how I look when I do this. So maybe not. It's an interesting.
That's beautiful. Pass my greetings to the dad there. All right. And as we close, I know that your spirituality, in other words, your Christian roots play a big role in your life. God plays a big role in your life, and that's how I got to know you as well. And as you close, can you just share with young people, a young girl, a young man who are listening now, who are at the crossroads of their career? How God helped you to make the kind of decisions that you made clearly that have worked with you, and what kind of word can you share with them to encourage them, even those that feel like, hey, life has passed me by, but I'm here now. What can they do?
While you're asking that question, I'm simply thinking of that verse that says, "Teach a child in the way in which they should go, so that when they're old, they will not depart from it." Some of the lessons that one learns while growing up, you don't fully understand the context or why an adult is trying to teach you that, but anyway, it registers in your head. And when I started my explaining my story, I told you that my parents had divorced and we were living with my maternal grandparents, and that was a lot of hardship. It was really a lot of hardship for me. But growing up, I always had hope for some reason. I don't know why. I just always had hope that things would be better. That I don't have money for tertiary, but I'm going to tertiary. I don't have money even going to Rand Girls. My mom was not employed at the time. She was unemployed. But I just wanted to go to that school, and by God's grace, something came through, and she was able to take me to Rand Girls, and I concluded my high school there. The same kind of thing happened for varsity, and so now reflecting back, and I termed it faith now. But it's one of those lessons that kept on sinking into my brain imperceptibly, but they kept on, sinking and sinking up until they created a bit of sound faith in me. And then when I got to university, I realized, growing up, I realized more and more that one needs a bit of quiet time, a bit of time where your mind and your soul can just shut down to something or revert back to something. And for me, that space has been God. And so when I was at varsity, I recall, because I'm Seventh-day Adventist, on Sabbath, there'd be exams and there'd be tests and there'd be tutoring and whatnot. And I say, well, on Saturday, I'm not coming, and that's it. People should just take it for what it is. And I remember a lot of people used to ask me, how on God's earth do you think you're going to pass if you're not coming to class on Saturday? And I remember that particular course, the people that were asking me the question, they all failed that subject except for me. I'm the one that passed.
Wow.
Only retrospectively do I think of these things, that God has always been a guide for me. He's always been there for me. And although as a child, one might not be able to articulate exactly what it is that you believe in and how it impacts your life, but looking back at it, you can see moments where God has pulled you through, and moments where you've learned as a person, you've developed in character, and you're able. I remember starting, maybe sharing this experience as well. I started working in construction, and I remember while I was a student, people said particularly to me, if you work with this man, forget about your Sabbath story. It will never pull through. He wants you at work every single day, and especially on Saturdays. And then I went to his office and I said to him, as a student, I said, this is my belief and I cannot work on Saturday. And he was okay with it as a student. And the same people said to me, he's okay with it now because you're a student, but once you start working, forget about it. I started working, and I remember one very profound thing he said to me. He said, if you have this amount of respect for your faith, I can only imagine that this is the amount of respect you're going to have for the job that you have.
Wow. That's a teachable moment right there.
That for me has stuck with me through the years, that, something that might have been perceived as a very negative thing in my career was something that he actually admired. And I remember every time he'd go run races, he'd come back and say to me, I saw people wearing T-shirts written Maranatha. What does that mean? And I'd have to... So you learn that the foundation or the belief system that you're raised up in really does mold the character that you become, and it molds the thinking that you have and your world views, and so that shouldn't be taken for granted and it really just becomes the navigating thing in your life. So that's what my faith has been for me.
Okay, really wonderful. And Maleshwane is saying, I am truly inspired. I am also truly inspired, Maleshwane. I've known Ukhethi for a while, but I didn't know a lot of these things about her. And I didn't know the kind of stuff that she learns, the experiences that she has achieved. And it means that, our country has hope. And our people, there are a lot of people out there who are doing great things but unfortunately we do not know enough about them. And in fact, Africa and the world we can have hope. Utu Maleshwane, I'm truly inspired. Push through, sis. More young, Black, gifted souls will learn a lot from you. We are the ones we are waiting for. Thank you so much, Maleshwane, for that. And I see you, Brownie Love. Mike has joined us. Welcome, Brownie Love. Temikosi Majigela Amajix. It was great to have you here in Joburg last week. Thanks, man. Upet Luvuyokazi Madolo Maduna has joined us. Thank you so much, Pet. I've been watching the music programs that you've been doing with the group. The great Stoneberry is here. Utotyelwa is here. Oscar Dube. And as I said, Ufakute is also here. People, we have come to the end of our program. What a great learning experience. What a great guest that I've had today. And I'm so happy that you're able to hold on. And I wish you a speedy recovery. As we come to the end, thank you, Katyeni, for bringing her. I hope many, especially youth, will be inspired. Indeed, they will be inspired, Katyeni. There is no way that they would not be inspired. I also see that Gobi Sakulati is here. Hello, Goto. Good to see you. You can see that a lot of people have come to join us, and many more will join us in the future. And I want to thank you for taking an afternoon of your time with the baby and family on a Sunday, on a cold Sunday, but you have been here. But to warm our hearts, to brighten our hope, and to give us a sense that it is possible. So thank you so much, Kheti, for your coming over.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor. I've enjoyed the session. And I think while speaking to some of my friends about it, one made mention that, she was almost speaking to the accounting and the finance sector and a lot of things to say about it. And I said to her, it would be nice to get a panel of young professionals so that next time you get a holistic view and holistic opinions of what they think needs to be done to grow South Africa, and referring to how to pass on the knowledge that we've learned to other young people. So that's just a general comment that's coming in. But really,
here's the platform. The platform is here. Here is the platform. Let's bring them here.
I want to bring them here. This is it. I want to have that panel discussion here, because I think it's really a great platform, and it reaches out to a lot of people. So thank you very much for this work that you're doing. This is mentorship. This is true living of mentorship that I was speaking to earlier on, and I'm really grateful for this platform. Thank you so much for everyone that came through and listened to the conversation. I hope to stimulate conversation more than anything. It was just to stimulate the conversation so that we can make South Africa better.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sisi. I really appreciate this. Umaleshwane is back. Uti, she's a powerhouse. Kensani, your sister. Uti, thank you. This was insightful and inspirational. I see Dumisani Ngola. Oh man, this guy used to help me with the IT and web in the past. So great to see you, Dumza, those years ago. I'd like just to encourage everyone who is watching and those that will be watching later to please subscribe to this channel, share it with your friends. You can have a look at many other topics that we've covered here, things that we've discussed. The purpose is to really inspire, share the stories, profile people and organizations and share their stories in order to inspire, to say, you may not have started well, but things can turn around. So there are many people like that. Someone like Sporo, for example, started off very, very poorly, but look at where he is now. Look at our guest today. So the name of the channel is called Moment of Insight and Growth. Please subscribe, share, and please also give us advice in terms of who we can interview. You yourself, you can approach me and say, I'd like to share, and then we can talk about it, and then people can hear. So thank you so much again. Please enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And Kheti, thank you to you again.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sisi. Take good care, and God bless.
All right.
Thank you, Kensani. Thank you, Maleshwane. Thanks, Gajeni. Thanks to everyone that has managed to join us today. I really appreciate Uti. I'm here for this new look. Thank you. I'm glad that you noticed. We're trying to improve as time goes on, and we're thanking you for the feedback. Really appreciate it. And and as I said, send your comments. Send your questions, send your topics. We're here to make sure that our country and the continent and the world gets better from these conversations. It's not just talk shop. It's about sharing experiences, what people have done on the ground to see them working. So thank you so much, Sisi. I'm going to say goodbye to you.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you again to those that have joined us for the first time and those that will be joining in the future. Please don't forget to subscribe, like this channel, share it with your friends, and also approach me and say, I'm in this industry, I'm in this field. I think I have lessons to share, or I know someone who can add value. We want to add value to society. We want our young people to have a sense that they can make something out of their lives. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take good care. Bye. All right, I'm going to say goodbye, colleagues, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And this week, this is supposed to be a kickstart for a great week for all of us. As you go back to work, enjoy your work, be inspired, inspire other people, mentor, you know, just develop, let's be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, so that other people can see better because we are here. Thank you. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.